84.
82.
Oh, cool.
And y'all are, how old are you?
17.
17. So they're 65 years difference. And the question you would have today is, what is he possibly going to say that might be pertinent to what you're doing in your life? I'll give you some facts about me to start, but there are more facts in the book. I was born in New York City. I was baptized in St. Patrick's Cathedral. Anybody know what that is? The most famous Catholic church in America. I grew up in a family of 9 children. I grew up on a farm, a chicken farm, but we had other animals. I drove a tractor when I was 10 years old. That would not happen anymore. Lots of people are smarter than I am, and maybe all of you are. But I bet you I can outwork you. I was in the newspaper business for 35 years. You don't really know anything about the newspaper business because it doesn't exist in the way that it used to. And people now take 2 things from a cell phone and think, here's what's going on in America. I've been married 60 years and have 5 children, ages 59 to 39. My wife has Alzheimer's. Anybody had any Alzheimer's in your family? No one? Who has Alzheimer's in
My
your
mother.
Your brother?
My mother.
Oh, your mother has. There are almost 7 million people in this country who have Alzheimer's. And let's assume that you live as long as I do. 1 out of 3 people age 85 or up will have Alzheimer's. You're going to live a lot longer than most people have in the past. My father died at 66, which wasn't unusual. So you're going to live longer lives. The farm goes broke, and so you move to Florida. I went to high school in Florida, and I went only with white people. Don't be surprised. That's how everybody went. They either went with white people or black people. They didn't go with both. I can remember the Ku Klux Klan. You know what that is? Please tell me you do. I can remember them marching through the streets. I went to the University of Florida, which is much harder today to get into. It's extremely hard to get into. It's one of the 5 best public universities in the country. All 9 of us had scholarships and worked our way through college. There were only 3 state universities. University of Florida, Florida State, and Florida A&M University. 2 of them only let white folks in, 1 of them only let black folks in. And you might say, wow, that's a long time away. Does it have any meaning to me? And I would argue that it might. I went into journalism. I worked 35 years at 7 newspapers. I retired as publisher of the Miami Herald in 1999. That's 25 years ago. Because the governor of Florida named Lawton Childs asked me to get interested in helping young people get off to a good start in life and in school. I lived a life where I've been in 56 countries. Not just fancy tourist places, but I interviewed child rape victims in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and talked about micro-lending in a village clearing in Bangladesh. I met every president and spent time talking with that president at one point or another in his life, from Richard Nixon to Joe Biden. I spent two long occasions 30 years ago with Donald Trump. I averaged 2 books a week, mostly history and biographies. Your parents could tell you this, and your grandparents could tell you this. I'm as happy as my unhappiest child. You probably have some unhappiness in your life, do you not? Folks do. And when your children grow up, mommy and daddy might be able to fix things now, but they grow up and they have adult problems, and they can't be fixed. I frequently say I'm only as happy as my unhappiest child. I'm as idealistic and optimistic. How many of you lead optimistic lives? And you have to participate, folks, or it isn't as though I'm getting paid any money to do this. You're the only one? I'm as optimistic and idealistic as I was when I was 10 years old. And I never lost that. At times that's a bit naive. You get burned sometimes. But I've gotten a lot more done that way than otherwise. I learn every day. I average at least 2 books a week, mostly history and biographies. I've been to 2 White House state dinners. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you what is possible in this world. And some of you will seize that, and others of you will say, it doesn't apply to me. It actually does apply to you. But you got to make up your mind to do it. And you're going to have to sacrifice for it. I don't belong to country clubs. I don't play golf. I don't play tennis. And I invariably say yes to people who want me to do something. That's how I came to be here. I'm very involved in schools. I have been for decades. How many of you go to public school? Do you go to public school?
Charter school.
Charter schools are public schools. They run by a few different rules, but they're public schools. 90% of children in America go to public school. Everybody in our family went to public school. All my siblings and I. Half the children who enter kindergarten in America are behind when they get there. And then most of them get further behind. Because teachers decide, not really going to make it. They give up on people. George W. Bush, who was the President of the United States, once talked about the soft bigotry of low expectations. Who can tell me what that means? The soft bigotry. Do you know what bigotry is? What's bigotry? Well, you guys are smart. Come on. Or you're faking it. What do you think bigotry is?
Foolish.
What?
Foolish.
No, it's not foolish. It is foolish, but it's not foolish. It's hatefulness. Do you think there's hatefulness in Miami and America?
Yes.
Do you think there's racism?
Yes.
Anybody not think there is racism? Yeah, we've made progress. But God didn't give anybody racism, did he? Not that I'm aware of. We all had to learn it from somewhere. So, yeah, we made progress. What percentage of kindergarten students are really, really, really ready to go to school and succeed? Half. Only half. And so, I'll be surprised if you can't tell me which students got off to these sorts of students got off to a good start in life. Am I right? It's obvious. Doesn't mean that you can't overcome things, but let's presume you're a lousy reader at the end of first grade. Let's assume there are 100 lousy readers in first grade. What percentage of them are lousy readers in fourth grade? You have to participate, folks.
Still half.
What?
Still half.
88 of the 100. It's very, very hard to catch up after you're behind. And then remember I talked about the soft bigotry of low expectations? People give up on other people. They decide these kids are rocking and rolling, they're doing great. I'm going to spend my time on them and maybe the kids who are on the bubble. And then they give up on other human beings. And so the folks they give up on, how do they react to that?
They go with it.
What?
They go with it. Like, they just go with the program of...
Yeah, well, they sort of act up and out. Do you understand what I mean? Every one of us needs that feel that we can do something. And if the teacher gives up on me, what am I inclined to do? I'm inclined to behave like a jerk. That's the real world. Have you ever seen that? Have you? Now, I told you we made a good deal of progress on race and racism. We'll never make enough progress until people confront themselves. Anybody know what that means?
Hold myself accountable.
You got this crap in your soul. God didn't put it there, right? The teacher didn't put it there. Other people helped you get it there. Maybe in your home, your own home, you got it there. And yes, we've made progress. We have a black woman running for president of the United States. Barack Obama was president of the United States. One of the better ones in my estimation. But if you listen to the campaign, and if you listen to one certain candidate, we have a hell of a problem with racism and prejudice. And so, slaves were first born, they came to this country somewhere between 20 and 30. No one knows the exact number. They came to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. And we had fought a civil war in which one of the principal themes was slavery and racism. And anybody here consider himself or herself a racist? No, see, you don't. You do?
I do.
Why?
Because it's just, it's ingrained in us.
But you
Especially
consider yourself personally a racist?
No.
That was the question.
Okay.
There are all kinds of things hidden in people that they don't even know. And you all could say to me easily, well, I don't have anything to do with this. I haven't hated anybody. We've not had any slaves in our household going back generation upon generation. How many of you come from immigrant families? Anybody not come from an immigrant family? Every one of us, to some degree, is an immigrant. Everyone in this room is an immigrant. Unless you're Native American, what we used to call Indians, you come from an immigrant family. On my mother's side, came from the Mayflower. That's 1620. on my father's side came from the Irish potato famine. That's in the middle of the 1800s. And when immigrants come to this country, whether they're Irish in the middle 1800s or Italians in the late 1800s, or Eastern Europeans, including Jews, in the early part of the 20th century, what happens to immigrants? What happens? I got to have you at least guessing at this stuff.
They don't get the access to opportunities.
What's worse than that, folks?
They get deported.
I know you're smarter than what you're laying out for me.
Do they get deported?
What?
The
Well,
deportation?
they generally did not get deported. What they did was to get enormous discrimination.
They face
The
prejudice.
what?
They face prejudice.
And they face enormous prejudice. So when the Irish come here in the 1850s, in the 40s and the 50s, because of a potato famine, more than 1 million people came. The Catholics were despised as ignorant, dirty, drunken people who paid allegiance to the Pope. Sounds pretty ludicrous now, but people didn't think it was then. Then the Italians come, and they're thought of as dirty, swarthy people, and they're discriminated against, including by the Irish. And in 1882, there is an act passed in this country. You think 1882 is a long way away. It's less far away than you think. There is the Chinese Exclusion Act. We don't want any Chinese in this country. And you think of World War II as a great fight against the Nazis, right? The President of the United States and the Supreme Court agreed 110,000 perfectly legal citizens of the United States who happen to be Japanese American were put in camps, concentration camps. We can't prevail and succeed and grow and progress in society unless we know these kind of things, where we have come from and where we want to head. We're a country that in your lifetime, what we call minorities in this country, is anybody here non-Hispanic white? None of you. I'm not Hispanic white. We live in a country that is inspiring and special, and there have been extraordinarily good human beings. We live in a country that still has enormous, frequently hatefulness about people coming to this country. Let's assume we don't let any immigrants in. Are there people who would not want any immigrants? Of course. You know that. What would happen to this country if we didn't have immigrants?
The economy would tank.
What would happen?
It would be less diverse.
What?
It would be less diverse. It would be less diverse.
It would be less diverse. What else would it be? Yes, ma'am.
People that work service jobs in the lower quarters.
And so there are jobs that some people who are already here wouldn't take, right? And jobs you might not want. Let somebody else do it. What else would happen in this country if we didn't have immigrants? Do you think immigrants work hard? They work harder than just about anybody else. That's the real world. They're willing to do things frequently that already you don't want to do. None of us particularly wants to do, and they work their butts off. Do immigrants have a lower or a higher or the same crime rate? What do you guess? Tell me. What?
Probably
Higher? You're wrong. And you're living with this stuff in your head. They have a lower crime rate than the rest of us, or maybe the rest of us do. Give me another reason why we need immigrants. What else might we need immigrants for?
Agriculture.
What?
Agriculture.
Yeah, certain specific jobs they might be more willing to do. They would willing to do tougher jobs than maybe the people in this room are.
The military.
Military? They can serve in the military? Yes, sir.
More equals.
Okay, tell me what you mean by that. You got it.
I think you're racist because you're excluding everybody else but besides your race.
Yes, sir.
Is it another thing like without immigrants, you wouldn't have like all the different cultures that we have now?
Wouldn't have what? Diversity of
The
cultures?
diversity
Is that
of
what you're
cultures.
talking about?
Yeah.
Probably healthy for us to know a lot of different kinds of people. And when I say all of this, it's not because I'm unpatriotic or don't love my country. I was just honored at Ellis Island. You know what anybody know what Ellis Island is?
It's in New York, right?
What?
It's in New York, right?
It's in New York, and between 1890 and 1950, 12 million people came to this country through Ellis Island. They now come through lots of different ways. I was honored as one of about 50 immigrant families who made a difference in America. They're some of the greatest people you've ever heard of are immigrants in one way or another.
So we're
I'm not going to use it.
No.
perfect.
So, tell me what Medicare is. What's Medicare?
It's a social service.
What?
It's a social service.
And who gets it?
Says
Retired people.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to be retired, but you have to be of a certain older age to get it.
65 or older?
Yeah, well, it's a little more complicated than that, but 62, I think, for women, etc.
Low-class families.
What?
Low-class families.
Low income.
Low income? You don't mean low class, you mean low income family. No, everybody gets it. You get it, you get it, you get it. It could be rich as whatever. Everybody gets Medicare. What's Social Security for? What's that about?
Your personal number.
What?
Your personal number.
Can't hear you.
Your personal number. Like the number they give you at birth. Your personal number.
But that doesn't mean anything. What does Social Security do?
Protect your identity?
What?
Protect your identity?
It's used for identity purpose, but that's not what Social Security is. Social Security came about in 1935 through a president, one of the better ones, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Why was it intended? What's it intended for?
Tracking.
What?
Tracking.
The program itself.
To allow you to have a social life after
So
certain age.
you work your butt off, you care, you pay money into Social Security, and when you reach a certain age, you get a certain amount of money every month. That way old people don't die in poverty. It used to be that old people had enormous poverty. I'm not telling you there aren't old people with poverty, but I'm telling you the number has been diminished. So everybody gets Social Security. I don't care if you're a billionaire, you get Social Security. So, if we don't allow any immigrants in this country, tell me what you think might be the consequences. We've already sort of mentioned some of them. What are the consequences? What would happen if we didn't have any immigrants? Yes.
The economy would suffer.
In what way?
There would be a lack of individuals working. There would be a lack of innovation because of all the big different backgrounds.
Okay. And so what's happening to the birth rate in the United States of America? What do you think is happening? Going down, exactly. It's going down. It's very significant because y'all are going to grow up. Many of you are going to want to have families at some point. you're gonna go work. And if you have fewer babies, and that is the trend, believe me, go to Europe, even more so. We're having fewer babies. We got 5 children. I'm one of 9. That's basically a world that is pretty much gone. And folks are having children later, or deciding not to have children, or I'll only have 1 child. Who the hell is going to pay for Medicare and Social Security?
The government?
What?
The government?
No, you're the government. You understand that? She's laughing, but it's not a laughable question. In theory, you're the government. People like you make up the government, locally, nationally, etc. There would be no one to pay for it. You have to have taxes to pay for that. And if you don't have any children, or etc., where's the money going to come from? And then we're going to have to take away Social Security. We're going to have to take away Medicare. And you think you're entitled to it and you've earned it, and that's legitimate. But there are consequences for all of this. People are marrying late. They have different sorts of relationships. Life's very expensive. You live in a town with an enormous problem of affordable housing. Do you know that? How many of you live in a rented home? The rest of you all live in homes that are paid for by your... That's why I want everybody to raise his or her hand if you're living in a rented place. You're living in it, you don't rent. What?
I don't really know.
What?
I don't really know.
Your parents pay rent, or do they own that house outright, basically?
Oh, they pay rent.
They pay rent, so then you're a renter if your parents...
Is anybody
pay rent.
not a renter here?
Yeah, my grandma owns the house that I live in.
So you live in your grandma's house. What's your story?
Mortgage.
What?
They have mortgage.
Yeah, okay, so you own a home. You pay for it over a period of time. Okay. But look at what we've seen here already. You live in a community with stunning wealth. People can have $45 million homes here. You know that? And other people are just struggling. And I know people who are good people, and they're very active, and they got good jobs, and boy, they'd sure like to move. And I could sell my house for pretty good money, they say, but where the heck am I going to get another house? And pretend you're a teacher. What's a beginning teacher make? You have to guess.
40,000.
What's a beginning teacher make?
30,000?
What?
30,000?
And what do you say?
60,000?
Well, a beginning teacher would make 52,000 in this community. Right?
Around 43,000.
No, not 43, I promise you. Not a beginning teacher. A beginning teacher here would make about $50,000, and if you all think I'm wrong, look it up. We have the 3rd biggest public school system in America. Anybody here not go to a public/charter school?
I go to a magnet.
Where do you go?
Magnet.
Spell it.
Magnet.
The name
Oh,
of the
magnet
school.
school. That is a public school. It's a particular kind of public school. 350,000 students in this community. It's the 3rd largest public school system. We have magnet, we have choice, etc. So you're in a magnet program. What's the magnet about?
Languages.
Languages. Okay. So we've given people a lot of choices. So a teacher making $50,000 came out of the University of Florida or wherever, somebody would like to buy a home. Can a teacher or a social worker buy a home?
No.
It would be terribly difficult to buy a home. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, maybe we don't have enough money in this country, but that's wrong. We were in Afghanistan for 13 years. 3 times the length of World War II. We spent $2 trillion to bring democracy to Afghanistan. Did we bring democracy to Afghanistan?
No.
Not in the slightest. And in fact, if anything, the situation is worse than when we entered it in 2001 or so. So the question is not, you have enough money. The question is, what are your priorities? What are you spending money on? I want you to go around and I want you to tell me, all of you are in high school, am I right?
Yeah.
I want you to tell me one book you've read that meant something to you. You're first.
The 7,
What?
She's in college. She just graduated last week.
Where did you graduate from?
real estate.
What?
Real estate, business school
Where?
from FIU.
Oh, FIU. How many students at FIU?
67,000?
56,000. One of the largest public universities in America, and they do extraordinary things. Give me one book that had some effect on you, meant something to you, etc.
Okay, I go to North Miami Senior High. I read the book Animal Farm.
Animal Farm.
Yeah, it was about a democracy where the animals took over the farm and
Were they kind and thoughtful and gentle?
no, the pigs were the smartest animals. They took over control over the other animals, took advantage of the other animals.
And so what's the point of that book, do you think?
That we do need rules and regulation.
And we need equity and opportunity
Yeah,
and
but,
fairness.
it would be better without the humans, but it was actually worse.
Yeah, exactly. Give me a book.
The Secret.
The what? The Secret? What'd you like about that book?
It just teaches you like the law of attraction and how you have to manifest things in life, to achieve goals, whatever you want in life.
Good for you. You, sir.
The Bible.
The what?
The Bible.
The Bible. Good for you.
It's called In Order to Live.
It's called what?
In Order to Live.
Okay, and what's that about?
It's about a girl who lives in North Korea, and she was a little girl, and she lived with her sister, and they didn't even live like in a house, like they lived in a little room, and they didn't even have enough to eat for rice, and she had to move to China, I think, and she was alone, they had to cross the border, and her mother left her. And a man took her to get married, and she was raped, and she was 13, 14, and she met a group, and she went to I don't know I think it was in Mongolia, like in China, but somewhere else, and she went with a group of
The Bible.
What was important about the Bible to you?
Well, for me, it has some stuff that changed my perspective on life, and I'm really interested of the concept of religion and where my religion comes from.
Okay, thank you. So I've read the Bible myself, though as a Catholic, you're a little different because you learn excerpts, epistles, and missals. You don't read, you don't see everything, so it's only in relatively recent years that I read the whole Bible. Okay, next table.
Marcos.
Not really sure,
A book that you read?
Fake something, make something up. Blow me away on this, okay?
I read a story about a girl in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and her whole family got blown up, and she found it, her family, in her own house where she was away.
Okay,
Just an
great.
article?
Okay, next, sir.
Solo.
Spell it.
SOLO.
Solo.
Yeah.
Oh, so what's that about?
No, it's like fantasy.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
Anybody here read The Hobbit? I love The Hobbit. It is so well written. This man writes the book, I think, in 1937. It wasn't part of my childhood, but it's a beautifully done book, and I don't even like fantasy. Yes, sir.
How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Who wrote that?
Dale Carnegie.
And what made you read that book? That goes back a long,
My
long
father
way.
made me read that book.
I took like a Dale Carnegie course, and so I just read it afterwards, and it changed the way I approach conversations.
Fantastic. Good for you. Next.
I don't think it works.
The prison doctor.
What?
The prison doctor.
The Prison Doctor. Tell me about that.
It's just a bunch of accounts of a doctor telling them like their story as they worked in different prisons. They at one point go to like an all-female prison because they like. It also okay.
Well, you're doing great.
Okay. She goes to an all-female prison because she feels like she's seeing too much suffering in the male one because it's all addiction and they all like because there's more problems over there. So she goes to an all-female one and she realizes that addiction is a problem everywhere and a lot of these people end up in prison because of theft and eventually she like goes on to talk
Yeah,
about
I mean, we imprison more people than any country in the world. Do you know that? More than China, more than Russia. We imprison more people than anybody else. We give up on people. We don't have much in the way of rehab, right? Boy, I believe in redemption. Yes, ma'am.
I read Half the Yellow Sun, and it's Half the Yellow Sun.
Oh, that's a great book by a Nigerian author.
Yeah,
It's a
during
really
my
fine book.
Yeah, I had to read it this year for school, but I thought it was really interesting just to see people's lives is so different in other places in the world where they're having so many political problems.
So
cultural
different,
problems.
but people are the same to some degree, right? Yeah, and there's lessons to learn.
Well, I normally read books for entertainment, like romance books, but in school...
I will keep it quiet. Don't worry about a thing.
But I did read...
It's between you and me.
To Kill a Mockingbird, which is like a classic, everyone knows it, which means to kill innocence, and it was just about this man, a black man, who was accused of a crime.
Rape, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
to this girl. And he ended up losing the case and dying. So it just gave me a perspective to how it was before. And like he said, it still hasn't, like, it's
So
made
what's your
progress,
book?
but not changed.
You may not quite be a student at this moment, but what is the book that you would recommend?
I would say Fahrenheit 451.
That's a great book. Tell people about that.
So it's basically a book about like censorship, and this is not working, so I'm just gonna project my voice. And the government or the people in power try to like censor everything that the population is trying to take in through books. And to me, I'm a big reader. I've always been a big reader since I was young. So books are really important. I believe that books are very important because they educate us in ways that maybe not even like teachers or schools can do, but we can take that into our own hands by reading books and just getting informed on like different things around us. So
Okay,
yeah, that's why.
Great.
Let's go to you.
So the last book that I audio listened, because I don't do well with reading, I have ADD, so audio listening, in case anybody has that too, helps. And Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and she, what I like, it's very complex, and there's different areas that she touches upon, but it's. She starts the book with a tiger that's caged in a zoo, and the tiger, walks back and forth, and I think she was a kid at that time, and she says, he doesn't seem very happy. Oh no, he's fine. He gets his food and this and that, and he's fine. And so I think the whole is how when we're little children, we're innocent and we want to explore and be just be children. And then the parents and the real world kicks in, and then, they kind of encapsulate us. And then when then at some point you realize that you need to break away from that because it's uncomfortable to
So
be
the story of the tiger, or lots of kind of animals, that tiger is going bananas. Right. I'm serious.
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing to do.
Yeah.
Because they're generally not really natural habitats. And so you go, if you were in a prison and you only could walk back and forth, it would ultimately be a destroyer of you. And that's what happens. What's your book?
I don't have any.
You must have a book.
Well, I like Suze Orman.
Who?
Susie Orman.
Oh, Susie Orman.
Okay.
Okay. You're just into money. Aren't you? Go ahead. You've got another book here. Go ahead.
So it's called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and it's basically about this super advanced AI called AM, Allied Master Computer. It was used for war, but then it gains consciousness. It develops a deep hatred for humanity, and therefore kills all of humanity except for 5 people and tortures them for like 100 years.
Good. So, I have a book. What are the advantages of reading a book?
Okay. We have another one that wants to say a book actually on the Zoom. Let me get on the screen to have Michaela join us. Tell us what your book is, Michaela.
I have a few because I do like to read, but I feel like the two major books that I think very much impacted me was this book called Almond, and it kind of just showed, it was a boy, he had this condition where the amygdala in his brain, like it doesn't function in the same way as everybody, so he can't really like process emotions, and we kind of just navigate like his indifference, like in society and like how he makes relationships, and I feel like it just really changed how I perceive other people, and like just like being accepting of people's difference. And then another one was Tuesdays with Maury. It's a memoir, and I just thought it was like the writing was really beautiful.
Just so you know, the author used to work for me in Detroit, so
Oh, really?
I know Mitch Albom extremely well.
That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite books, and it kind of just goes through his the author Mitch. He like observes his teacher who's dying from a condition called ALS, where I'm pretty sure like your body like slowly like shuts down, and it's just the writing is really beautiful, and I would recommend it to everybody.
He's a very good writer. Those are 2 good books. So tell me, folks, why
I have a book.
you read books?
I do have a book.
What's the value of the books?
I have a book myself.
Well, if I decide to permit you to have a book, okay.
May
You go ahead. What's the book?
It's called Man-Made Language, and the author's last name is Spencer. I completely forgot the first name. It just slipped my mind now. But I read it in high school. I had a debate coach introduce it to me, and in debate rounds, we would talk about, it taught me the importance that discourse shapes reality. Like the words that we speak literally change the world and how we talk about those things, right? And so when you if you were to go up to a group of guys and ask them, oh, hi girls, how are you doing? It would offend them, right? But if you were to call them guys, it would not offend them, right? So it's just about saying humankind instead of mankind, and the words that we use literally impact how the world views us in today.
That's important. Good. So why do I want you to read books? What's the reason for that?
You get a different perspective.
You get a different perspective. That's one. Yes, sir. Say again?
Expand your knowledge.
Expand your knowledge, okay.
You get experience for a place that you have never been.
So you get an experience that you would not otherwise have.
So you stay literate.
So you stay literate.
You expand your imagination.
Okay. Imagination is very important for people. Great things get done with imagination.
For not just wisdom, but also relaxation.
Relaxation.
Change your mindset.
Change, get a different way of looking at the world, whether it's knowing something about North Korea and what it's like. I'm serious. That's a good lesson for you, is it not? It's a good lesson for all of us. So, I average 2 books a week. And I chair a foundation. I'm on a bunch of different boards. My wife has Alzheimer's. I lead a full life. but I average 2 books a week. Some of them I read at least partially on Audible, because I go walking in the dark 4 days a week. It's safer in the dark, I promise you, than in the light. Not any traffic, basically.
Smart. And you avoid the heat.
And, right, and I'm not dressed to go eating, I promise you. And I read books, I'm in 3 different book groups. One of them I have hosted at my home for 10 or 11 years. 25 people come to my home. Most of them are in their 30s or 40s. To get in the book group now, it requires a real hurdle because everybody wants to be in it in theory. And so what happens is I give you 3 books to read, my choice. You read them, come back and talk with me, and I'll let you in. A lot of people say, I don't want all that work, so they don't come in. Why do I want you to read? How did Hitler come to power? What?
Status.
But how did he come to power? What made him come to power? How did he get into power in 1933? How did he get into power?
He published his ideologies. And
What?
He published his ideologies and gave everyone something.
Yeah, he published his ideology after the First World War in the early 20s. It's a book called Mein Kampf, My Struggle. If you ever read it, which I have twice, it's terrible writing, but it sure shows you what the hell he intended in this world.
Yeah, you could say Mein Kampf is an autobiography. That's one thing that helped him,
And
gain
so
the power and
10
influence.
years later, basically, he comes into power. How did he come into power?
Reading. People read it.
What?
I heard that. So Germany was going through a Great Depression, and he influenced them, like almost convinced them that he could make the Great Depression better, or.
Yeah, there's a really good book called In the Garden of Peace about this, but there are many books about this. And a lot of people would say he came because there were stormtroopers, etc. And there were stormtroopers. But we have this terrible depression after the First World War. Germany is defeated. People like Adolf Hitler, who was a corporal in the war, an honored corporal in the war, and others said he cheated on the peace deal was illegitimate, etc., and we were sold out. Not true, but that's what he and others said. And then who do you sort of blame this on? Who do you blame it on? Yes,
The Jewish people?
the Jewish people. How many people died in World War II?
60 million.
60 million people died. I have been to Auschwitz. You know what that is?
Yes.
There were many concentration camps. I went with somebody who had been in Auschwitz as a little girl, 10 years old. The world is somewhat based on whom do we blame for our difficulties. And the Jews were blamed. And the Gypsies or the Roma were blamed. And other people were blamed. And if you were homosexual, you're going to be dead. And if you had an intellectual disability, you're probably going to be dead. And Hitler came to power finally because the business community in Berlin and other places said, well, he's better than the communists. And 60 million people later are dead, including 400,000 American military. Think something like Hitler could happen again? How many people think it could happen again? Raise their hand or don't raise your hand. I'm going to... Anybody not think it could happen?
One.
Why not?
Because I think like other countries would step in and stop that from happening.
You see it all over the world now. You see it in Hungary. You see it in Poland. You see it in the Philippines. You see vestiges of it in France and in the United Kingdom. Please don't think that it can't happen again. How many of you think you're really well-informed people? Really well-informed people? I don't see any hands up. Get informed. I want you to read books for a bunch of reasons. To get ahead in America, and I suppose any place, to get ahead, what has to happen for you? What has to happen? What has to happen to get people ahead?
Consistency.
What?
Consistency. Consistency.
What's that mean? I know what consistency
In
means.
the sense that even if you feel like you have to keep going, like you see the goal, but you have to keep straight because there are things that are gonna make us.
Okay, and every one of us is going to face things that push us back. And how do you wisely overcome this? I'm not talking about steamrolling other people, but that's what needs to happen. So hard work helps you get ahead, doesn't it? And sort of a vision of what you want to be, that helps you get ahead. Knowing things helps you get ahead. But I'm telling you what the real secret is. Beyond your values, which are terribly important. What really gets you ahead is you know how to build relationships with other human beings. And you learn to build relationships by having things to talk about. If I've been to 56 countries, if I've been to Auschwitz, if I'm reading, averaging 2 books a week, if I have raised millions of dollars in this community for things. Millions of dollars. And it's about building relationships. Anybody know what El Camino de Santiago is? Okay, there's a famous walk. Are we running out of time?
No.
Okay. There's a famous walk across the top of Spain. Supposedly St. James the Apostle did it, but nobody has any evidence. At its longest extent, it's 508 miles, would take you 6 or 7 weeks to do it. It's a pilgrimage. Tens of thousands of people have done this for years and years and years. So I helped somebody with a book here in this community. The book is published. I had a lot to do with helping to get the book done. And this man has done extremely well in this community. There are some people who are stunningly good in kind of serial entrepreneurism. You make some money, then you make more money, then you make more money, you make more money. Some people are good at that. I wouldn't be good at that. And so I helped him with his book, which was about doing this thing, which is across the top of northern Spain. I didn't take any money from him because I don't take money from friends. So he invites me on this pilgrimage. And I went the last significant leg. And in the next to last night that I'm there, he knows what I'm involved in. Children, getting successful. Says, I'm about to sell my company. He sold it, it was October, I'm about to sell it. Sold it in February. I'm going to give you $5 million. It's all about relationships. It's not because I'm particularly smart. I'll give you another story. I go to a lot of things in this community. I say yes to everybody. Most everybody. And I meet a man named Eduardo del Riego. How many of you are from Cuba? A few of you are from Cuba. In the last 2 years, 1 million more Cubans have come to this country. So it's not something that's way back when. And I go to a benefit for intellectually disabled young people. Might be Down syndrome, might be significantly on the autism spectrum, etc. 1 out of 6 children in America is a child with a special need. And every child deserves a chance to fulfill his or her potential, which is not the same as saying we all have the same potential. We don't. So I go to this benefit, there are 800 people there. It is August of 2022. Essentially 2 years ago right now. At the next table is Mr. Del Riego. I've never heard of him. Very successful. Has a company in this community, Coral Gables. Came from Cuba when he was 6. His wife came when she was 15. He went to FIU. His wife went to FIU. They have a daughter who's an attorney. Husband is an attorney. Have 2 small grandchildren. And he could afford an extraordinary house and an over-the-top car. But he's not that kind of guy. I've never heard of it. We meet the next week in his office. We have a long conversation. I know what he watches on TV. I know what he reads. I know he's a strong Catholic. I know his backstory. And his central theme is, I'm 67 and I really haven't done anything for my community. And by community, he wasn't talking about the Cuban community, though he's Cuban. It was about the larger community. And then he asked me about myself. He knew that I had been publisher of the Miami Herald. He knew I had retired to work on getting children off to a better start. He knew that I had led the campaign for the Children's Trust, which this year will give away $207 million in this county. What he didn't know, that my wife had Alzheimer's. He didn't know that we had 5 children and 7 grandchildren. He didn't know that my wife was Jewish and I'm Catholic. And then he asked me, what did I think of Cristo Rey? Anybody ever heard that name? There's a school in this community. Do you know the name? Oh, I thought you could say that. Yeah. So, Cristo Rey, of course, means Christ the King. There are 39 of them in this country. The first one was started in Chicago by the Jesuits. It's Catholic, but not parochial. And the school had just opened here, and the model is very different. First, you have to report against the school. You go to school 4 days of rigorous economics. It's only a high school. On the 5th day, you go to work for a law firm, or Baptist Health, or an airline, and you turn your money over to the school. And that sort of pays half of it, and vouchers pay the other half. You may well be 2 years behind when you enter high school. Everyone will go to college or be eligible for a good college. It's a remarkable model. So it's in North Miami. In the past year, we've raised $14 million for a 38,000 square foot classroom building, which is a big building. Eduardo said to me, I just went there, just opened. What did I think of it? Are you praying? Oh, just checking. If you're praying, it's fine with me, just so you know. kidding you. Okay? This is not the worst moment of your life that I was making silly. There'll be other major moments coming up that I won't be part of. So he asked about Cristo Rey. What did I think of that? I told him how high I was on it. The next week, the chair of the board called me. Dave, you're not going to believe this. Eduardo Del Riego will give us $500,000 next week. Not in a challenge grant. The chair says to me, he'll give us $500,000. Not a challenge grant. You don't have to match it, but you got to do two things. Number one, I don't want my name used. You live in Miami where people want their names used, right? You see them on buildings all the time. But a much higher form of charity is, I don't need my name used. There was a famous rabbi of the 12th century Spain called Maimonides who talked about that latter. Number two, Eduardo Del Riego says, I want that altar. There's a big mahogany Catholic altar in the place. I want that altar named for Roberta Lawrence, my wife. Now, how many of you are Catholic? Not many Catholic altars named for Jewish people. I know of none. Well, you could do Jesus, who was Jewish. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, 8 are the guys, the Virgin Mary, St. Joseph, Mary Magdalene. You felt run out of Jewish names. They had to check with the Archbishop here. Could you even do this? And it turned out you could. And on September 15th of 2022, the Archbishop came to dedicate the school. Eduardo Del Riego was there with his wife. His friend of mine, Mike Fernandez, was there with his wife. He's the person I told you about the $5 million. All 5 of our children came from elsewhere in the country. Their mother, my wife, was there. And if you came into the school, you would see a brass plaque with the name of Roberta Lawrence and Archbishop Thomas Meinske. I didn't ask him for any money. People give to people. People believe in people. There's a lot of good causes. On Give Miami Day, which will be November 20th to 21st this year, more than 1,000 nonprofits will participate. Well, cancer is a good cause. ALS, which was mentioned earlier, is a good cause. You all can think of an enormous number of good causes. And they are. But people give to people. And that's the power of building relationships. Having things to talk about. Most people don't have a lot to talk about. And you need to have a life where you're not showing off. You're trying to connect with other human beings. And the more you read and see, the more you're going to be able to do this kind of thing. Eduardo Del Riego, incidentally, is now given $3.5 million to the school. And Mike Fernandez is given $2.5 million. There's so many good people in this world. And we have a lot of hatred in this country, right? Anger, hatred.
Greed.
What? Greed. Yep. Who the hell needs a $45 million house anyway? It isn't as though it's going to be sort of in the family for generations to come, and you don't need that. You don't need a Bentley. You need to be able to get from one place to another. You need to give your best at whatever you do, however much you're paid for that. And ultimately, what's important is not some honor you receive. What difference did you make in this world? What? In what difference did you make in life? And it doesn't have to be well known. It can be helping one individual person. or a school, or lots of other kinds of things. I know you are in favor of a bunch of things, that's all nice, but what actually did you make happen? What difference did you make? Two last things I mentioned, very, very briefly. Think about kindness as a great virtue. Figure out how to tell people you love them. I'm not talking really, I'm talking about admiring, loving, making people feel better and honorable. In the book, you'll see a story. And it involves my father. He's in the hospital. He is dying of liver cancer. And I am the head of the Detroit Free Press. And I fly down to see my father and mother in Tallahassee, where my father is in the hospital. I spend time, but I have to go back. My father would die a couple of weeks later. And my father, when I was about to depart, I bent down to kiss him on his forehead. Now, I grew up in a loving home. We knelt for prayers every single night, all 11 of us. We traipsed into church one after another, every Sunday. We didn't have a lot of money, and we mostly got books for presents. I knew my parents loved me, but when I did that, my father said, I want you to know that your mother and I are so proud of you. What did I want him to say? What did I want him to say? I love you. Life can go so instantly. You think you're in charge and you're in control, and suddenly somebody you love deeply is dead. Gone. A little too late to celebrate people when they're in a box or in a crematory. Find ways. This isn't this is a game. It's not a management device. It needs to come from the soul. Make sure whoever is with you, beginning with people who raised you, know that you really, really love them. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Can you film the last part of it? I'm so grateful for you coming and speaking to them. And the reason that you're here today is actually a couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I had asked a friend of mine and mentor, Pastor Charles Scott, who works in Frederica Wilson's office in particular, to give me an example of a successful leader that is profitable, like can live their life profitably, but do good in the world at the same time. A public servant, a true one, right? And he was like, David Lawrence Jr., he's the superhero for you.
Okay, that's enough.
So
who wants a book signed?
So he's going to sign 14 books because he cares about each one of you individually. He asked me all of the names of the students beforehand, and because of Laura Joyce at Books and Books, we were able to last minute get 14 copies of his very well sold book. And for
22,000 have been sold, folks.
22,000
have been sold. All the money
sold.
goes to children's books, non-literary.
So all the money and proceeds from this book go to the Save the Children's movement of Florida, which he's leading. So I really recommend it for anybody. Go out there, purchase it, read it, and learn from your own. Thank you so much.